everyone. You're watching Direct Line live with our special guest, candidate for U.S. Congress in CD6, Dan Cox, and our hosts tonight are Mark Unkfriend and Jackie Saxton. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Dwight. Dan, thank you for joining us. So I'll kick it off with the first question, which I think is the one on a lot of people's minds, which is what made you decide to jump into the race?
Well, thank you both. It's a privilege and pleasure once again to speak with you and to have the opportunity to speak to the great people that care about our state. You know, this is a important year. I think we're looking at the upcoming election cycle as being probably one of the more important ones in our lifetimes. I mean, it's, you know, we always tend to say that as Republicans, but at the end of the day, we can see what's on the line this year is very strong. We've got the House majority we've got to keep and build upon, and we have honestly, some significant world events that have to be dealt with in a very firm and governed fashion that will take some good leadership. And I do have some of that background. You know, my undergrad degree is not only political science, but has an emphasis in national security. And I have studied world politics for many years. But furthermore, you know, as a constitutional lawyer, just looking around and seeing that all the work we did in the last, I would say 20 years as Republicans here is not in vain. I mean, we see an increase in, for instance, not only Republican registrations, but we also see an increase in people who are wanting really down to earth candidates, politicians that are not politicians. We see that with, unfortunately, some of the independent voters not being willing to join our party. So I think that we can make the case to say this is the big tent. This is the place that we have real candidates that are truthful. They're going to stand up to the Biden debacle presidency. They're going to, instead of letting the status quo go in D.C. and with the normal political, back and forth, divisive and cronyism, say, no, we're going to have some real folks, some people that are family men and women who care about our kids, who are our parental supporters, who love our country, and who back Israel, go to Congress and not see this radical agenda being shoved on us. And I think we can do that. I know we can do that in CD6. So that's what motivated me to jump in.
So go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, so you referenced the fact that, keeping and expanding the Republican majority. CD6 has been positioned as really being one of the most critical races. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, sure. I've heard from the NRCC, talked with the chair that, it's one of the 4 nationwide that is really being looked at as a likely flip red. I think the Cook report is already noticing some of that. It's showing leaning certain ways. But I think what we need is not only a candidacy to bring out the vote, which we can deliver. We've got the brand name, we've got the name recognition, and we can get the ground game going. We did that in the last cycle. But in addition to that, I want to present an attractive message to independents that says, this is your party. We need to build that, because right now, as you know, CD6 is razor thin. It's frankly, I think a D1 in practical nature. It might be listed as a D2, but it's very close. So with literally a little bit of work, we can not only have a congressional campaign, but we can have a registration push with that effort that not only allows new voters to come into our party, but to give people an option and a vision as to why they want to vote Republican. And it's just like what we see with President Trump nationally, just igniting the electorate. I mean, 10 points up on Biden right now with all that President Trump has had to suffer. And yet we see that going on right now. And I think it's likely to happen here in CD6 for several reasons, one of which is we don't feel like we have representation in Congress right now. I mean, literally, we've got, as you know, not only David Trone, but we've got Jamie Raskin on the south end of Montgomery County. It's just not the temperament of the district at all. And so I think we can not only bring that message, but move people into the party. And I'd like to see that become, I'd like to see it an R+1 at least, by the next cycle or moving close to that. I'd like to start getting that movement going as we've been working on for so many years.
So, what are you going to do differently than you did in your gubernatorial race? Because it doesn't seem like the message necessarily resonated statewide, at least. So, what's going to be the difference in strategy this time?
Well, I certainly am sorrowful that we didn't pull off the win, but I do want to highlight a couple things in terms of the messaging. For the money we had, 1.6 million compared to Westmore's 20 million, we did a pretty darn good job with our campaign, and we could have obviously had a better messaging strategy with cable TV if we had been able to raise that additional amount. It's a very difficult climate, as you know. There were multiple factors because of that. The fundraising issues were pretty state-centric on that. But going forward, looking at the positives, so if you analyze where we actually did a lot of good success, what did we actually do that was good? And that was, number one, we swept across the state the school board elections. There were coattails there, if I could be so bold to say that. We had over 22 parental rights type advocates be elected to some of the more expensive budgets across the state. That's huge. That's very important, because that shows you that people care about ground games and they care about their local issues. So we're going to continue to build on that. I see our party doing that right now. I'm thrilled with that. The focus on local elections is fantastic. It needs to. We've had success. We saw the party have success. We can do that. I know Roxy just rocked it, down in Prince George's. So I can see that is the path. And then when you add to that the fact that the Republican base is energized, and we have that energy. I mean, if you look at the primary that we ran, with all of this mudslinging that happened against us, and I hope it's noted by the party that I tried not to respond in kind. But that aside, it's a primary. That's what primaries are for in terms of elections. But what happened was we had the largest GOP turnout in the history of Maryland primaries for governor. And, my numbers were 70,000 more votes than the sitting governor had in his contested primary, which is not to, in any way paint a negative. But what I'm trying to say is there was some positives that we did for the party that I think we can carry forward for that through the election. So then you add to that the fact that we need to have money. We're going to raise money. We have hired a team that is well positioned from the national perspective, that has elected over 40 members of Congress. They know what they're doing in a congressional race, and we're very excited about that. And then when you bring to the table the new focus, both of our party and of all Republican candidates, we have to have this focus, and that is to have a legal strategy to make sure that we get those ballots from our Republican candidates and our independent voters into the ballot box. So that's I think, building upon the successes that we did have. There were strong successes, and that is our goal going forward.
So looking at the numbers, District 6 can sometimes be like the tale of two cities, or at least two areas, which is you have Western Maryland, and which votes Republican. Frederick County, in the parts in Frederick that are in 6 have been competitive. But then you come down to Montgomery County, and although more of Montgomery County is in District 8, the parts of Germantown and those more recently developed areas have tended to vote overwhelmingly Democratic, and that's really where Trone has been able to be successful. Can you elaborate? Do you have a more specific strategy as to what do you tell to somebody in Germantown? How do we get more competitive there?
Well, as you know, we had Hispanics and Latinos for Dan Cox. We had Asians for Dan Cox, and we had one of the largest Indian American movements in Republican history in our race, and that is going to carry forward because obviously, as we all know, the demographics of Montgomery County, especially, but also Frederick County, is moving in a direction where we need to have everyone at the table in our party, and they need to know that they have a place in our party. And so that's what we've done before, and we're going to continue that. It's exciting to do that because we see that there's so much in common. And when the Latinos and the Hispanics hear the Republican message of freedom, of family of faith and of ensuring that, your business keeps more of your money. That's what they want. That's what they came to this country for. And so they're poised to continue that increase. If you look at the numbers, for instance, we had, and Governor Ehrlich mentioned this to me as well, that we've had some of the largest increase of Hispanic support in Maryland history in the last cycle. I think, and I was proud that and grateful that the Baltimore Sun even highlighted that our campaign was so focused on that. In fact, if you recall, the article said that the Democrat that was quoted in the paper is saying, well, Dan Cox has a great outreach to the Hispanic and Latino community. And we wish that, that the Democrats would start doing the same. So I felt a little pride for our party in that, to say, look, that's who we are as a party. And I know Governor Ehrlich worked at that as well, and he was encouraging in that regard. So I think going forward, looking at Montgomery County, yes. But if you look at those numbers, if we can pull 35%, we're good. And if you look at my precincts in the governor race, we did that in many, many precincts. Now, for those deep, hard precincts that are difficult, we're going to get in there and we're going to work hard. We're going to earn votes. And we're going to make sure that every Republican turns out, because that's part of the problem, obviously. But at the same time, I want people to know who I am and that I'm going to be their voice regardless of party, and that they're going to have an opportunity to speak directly with me. And it's not going to, I'm not a partisan guy at the end of the day. I mean, I believe strongly in our Republican values, and I won't compromise on the principles that make our party great. But we are a work across the aisle type of leadership campaign. I've done that in Annapolis. People don't know that about me a lot of times. We found out in some of our polling that, the Democrats were successful in painting me a certain way. So we're going to work hard to make sure that doesn't happen again. And we're going to work hard to make sure that the messaging of the work that we've done, including the unanimous bills in a deep 2-to-1 state, the unanimous bipartisan bills that I've passed and worked on, can be a highlight for what they would see in a Congressman Cox, that my office would be open to everyone, and we can lead and with principles that will benefit our families and our businesses and our state without this hyper partisanship.
So shifting over to talk about specific issues, when you look at a lot of people online who are breaking down and analyzing what went wrong for Republicans, both in the 22 cycle and the 23 cycle nationwide, a lot of people are leaning towards abortion being that issue after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So especially when that seems to be a hot button issue for particularly suburban white women, which is basically Montgomery County and Frederick County to an extent, how do you plan on tackling that particular messaging and that particular issue during your campaign, since it's bound to come up in a general election for sure?
Well, everybody knows I'm pro-life. It can't have 10 kids not be pro-life, but it's a non-issue. Maryland has one of the most liberal abortion policies and laws, really in the nation. It might be topped by California. I'm not quite sure. It's not an issue here. The issue in Maryland that we're going to talk about, and the issue that is in front of every single voter, is that moms, whether they're white or suburban or black or Asian or Hispanic or Latino, moms are needing to put food on the table and have their money in their pocket, and they're not seeing that with this current quote unquote Bidenomics. They're just not seeing it. Why? And so when they come to the holidays, when they come into the spring, when they're coming through paying for school and clothing and trying to make those tuition payments, or trying to even just buy books, if their kids are going to public schools, it's just not helping them. This current economy is not helping them. And so that's where it's at. That's what we're going to talk about. That's what Republicans bring to the table, that is not divisive, and it's focused on encouraging and supporting the moms who have kids who need to be making sure they're actually succeeding and not just peddling, and treading water, so to speak, in our state. When you compare, the economies even around us, Maryland has a disadvantage, and we want to make sure that Maryland becomes back once again the most attractive state to live, work, and retire in. And we're seeing particularly CD6 being a highlight of how many people are nervous and concerned because they're having to go across state lines. If you're in Allegheny County, for instance, or Washington County, most of the time you're traveling down to Virginia or Washington, D.C., or even Pennsylvania. I've had the privilege of working in Pennsylvania some as well as my law practice. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen, the road just packed with commuters from Maryland. Why? Because our economy is stagnant here. It's struggling. And when you add to that, the latest news of the power plants shutting down, I mean, this is a real concern for our Maryland citizens. And so I think when we focus on that, and then, of course, have the money to defeat we're going to play hardball this time. We're not going to sit back as a punching bag like we did before and smile when the smear campaign comes. We're coming on full steam. When we raise the money, we're coming on full steam with the cable TV and everything else to bring our positive message as Republicans into everybody's living rooms. We're not going to stand by and let people smear us again.
So talk about the issues that you would want to focus on if you're a member of Congress, and are there particular ones where you think, as you describe some of the more bipartisan efforts that you did in the state legislature, that you'd be able to replicate in Congress?
Well, sure. I think the issue regarding the border and sex and human trafficking of children is a huge concern. It's especially concerning in Maryland. We have just this week, we highlighted this, that there have been over 7 schools were shut down because of various criminal actions. And so crime and safety is a priority. I think we can focus on that and bring that to bear, bring the bully pulpit of Congress to bear with the budget process, as well as the negotiation process with local officials, to say we can do better to make sure that our families are safe and education being a priority. I mean, one of the beautiful things about independence in Montgomery County is education is probably their top pick. And we've learned this for years, working with them and working with various across the aisle people, that education is a unifying point. And in fact, Mark, it's interesting. This year, I was told that my good friend, the much more left than me, Delegate Moon, gave me a shout out in the legislature, in my committee, the Judiciary Committee, because he was introducing, or one of the Democrats was introducing my bill to support teachers who are being attacked in the classroom or who are trying to break up a fight. And the point of it is to allow teachers some protection so that they can not be sued in the process of trying to defend their own lives or defend another student, to have a good Samaritan type law. Anyway, I was encouraged to see that education was unifying to the point where even Delegate Moon gave me a shout out and told my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, that it's a good bill. It's Dan Cox. So it's got to be good. It's an education bill. And so I think there's some unifying issues with education, with fighting crime, with making sure our border's secure. Those are some of the top things we're going to be focused on. But of course, we cannot ignore our international situation right now. I mean, we're on the brink of World War III. Some people are saying we're already slipping into it, and Biden isn't even aware of this. But my concern is we've got to stop it. We've got to stop the warmongering. We've got to make sure that, most importantly, that our budget is secure, because our greatest national security threat, I don't think, is this whole effort by the left to shut our power plants down, our coal plants that are clean energy sources. We've got to be very cautious with how we switch over to other sources. We've got to make sure they're in place, or else we're going to have a national security concern here on the home front. And as you see, we already have a budget problem. We've got $33 trillion in debt. That's $100,000 per person. So sadly, my kids and young people, such as you, Jackie, I mean, we're giving you over $100,000 in debt right now. And that is going to be catastrophic. No nation can legitimately keep its government functioning if that continues. And so you're going to see that have to be addressed. And it's not something that is rocket science. You look around the world, and nations that go belly up with their currency and their economy, their budget issues, and their debt to ratio. You know what our debt to GDP ratio is? It's 130%. Consider the fact that Russia's at 20%. That's a horrible thing to have one of our adversaries, so-called, that is on the brink of World War III with us, to be at such a stronger GDP position. That's not good for our debt situation. So I think that we've got to remember those those debt concerns that are national security issues, but everyday kitchen issues means, lower the inflation, make sure that our dollar counts. And that includes a good education, not this craziness that we end up having all the time with the crime out of control.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about spending. As you talk about, we're running very large deficits, and certainly in the Biden years and through the COVID period, they've really mounted up. In just a few years, the trust funds, I say that in quotes, but the trust funds for Medicare and for Social Security run out of money. What is your position on whether or not those should be opened up and changes either to benefits or changes in the tax policy to address that?
I think we need to be very cautious in any changes to vested interests. As a litigator, I have stood firmly against unilateral changes to vested interests. Vested interests meaning, someone who's paid in all their life, and then all of a sudden they no longer have the benefit they paid for, or the goal changes, keeps changing. You're looking, you planned your whole retirement over retirement age 65 or whatever it is, 62, and all of a sudden the goal changes because we don't have the money. We have to be very cautious about that. I wouldn't support that. I would be more focused instead on shoring up these funds. As you say, it's a disaster waiting to happen. So I would look at some very good conservative policy think tank information from places like Steve Moore and Heritage Foundation to look at their options carefully. And if they're proposing something that would not change vested interests, but would also not be something that would be shocking the electorate to where that would not be welcomed, then that would be something I would avoid. But anything that would support the Social Security funds and the trust funds, we've got to take action on immediately. So I'll be there working very hard with my colleagues and people who have worked on this in a way that would shore those up and benefit. And, one of the things that upsets so many people, just to bring it down to, again, kitchen table, everyone understands that we've sent billions overseas to support other countries, including, I'm hearing now this week, yachts being purchased with our money that were intended for other reasons. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I'm hearing this, seeing news reports of this. And if true, it should be looked into seriously, because that money would be better off spent shoring up the trust funds. We've got to do that. So I would look very carefully to make sure that no senior citizen is denied their money, their hard-earned retirement, and we've got to protect that.
So sticking on the topic of spending, but from that international perspective, there's two huge wars going on right now, and we can take them one at a time, but there's a lot of conversation going on in Congress about continuing to fund our allies, both in the Ukraine and in Israel. So starting with Israel, would you in Congress vote to continue funding the Iron Dome and the IDF?
Yeah, I would support Speaker Johnson's efforts on that, and I would make sure that we have our own Iron Dome here in America. I'm very concerned that President Reagan's SDI policies are not being properly implemented to protect our own shores as well. So we've got to make sure that's being funded. I know Congressman Roscoe Bartlett, my former boss, did a lot of work in the area of protecting the homeland. He was, I think, a chair of the committee, one of the committees regarding that, with the EMP bomb concern and all of that. But moving forward with foreign aid, I would be very cautious with making sure that the money is accounted for. And I would not be supportive of supporting foreign wars. I would definitely support Israel. We've got to make sure they're protected, but at the same time, we've got to make sure our own borders are protected. I mean, this nonsense of sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, who I love Ukraine. My nephew's wife is from Ukraine, and I helped her get her green card. Absolutely pray for them every day, because her brother's over there on the front line. So, I mean, this is my family, on the front lines of Ukraine. And so I understand the struggle there, but the last thing we want to do is sending billions of dollars to advance a bunch of oligarchs' private personal wealth, if that's the case. And the misuse and misspending of money is horrific. while at the same time, peace deals are being ignored, that according to the news reports. I'm hearing that some of the options that were there on the table, the Biden administration pressured Zelensky to ignore. Zelensky may have been waiting and ready to go forward with it. Now, obviously, I'm not privy to all the information, so I want to be cautious here and not take final judgments on any of this. But I'll say, as a matter of policy, I'm not supportive of sending billions of dollars to fight foreign wars. So any money that goes to our allies, yes, we need to support our allies. Yes, we need to protect those who we have treaties with, but we have to be very cautious, like President George Washington warned us of, just without thought, without deliberation, and without care, entering into foreign wars.
So would you support supplying military material as opposed to sending money, or is your concern about Ukraine across the board?
I would be very cautious about that. I would have to take it on a case-by-case basis and look carefully at the vote. I would not be I would be open-minded to the concerns, and I would like to see the briefings, because I don't have this information in front of me. But as a matter of as a dad who's trying to pay our bills, and I've got young people in my household, and also those who have who have flown the coop, my older kids, they don't want to go to war. They don't want to be dragged into war. They don't want to be drafted or be forced to die on a foreign battleground, that they have no understanding of why in the world it's happening. And, there seems to be a lot of corruption with the Biden administration. Apparently Biden himself getting some kickbacks through his son Hunter. We see all of this as an issue. So I would look very cautiously and carefully at that. Obviously, I do not support just handing out all of our military supplies and depleting them. That's, I think, something that everyone pretty much agrees with. We have to be cautious with. And I see the Biden administration on the verge of doing that, if not already endangering our supplies, from what I've seen. So I would take that on a case-by-case basis and be very cautious.
So definitely one of the major issues, and we're seeing this with sanctuary cities across the United States, is the flooding of illegal immigrants into the country, and our states not having the funding or the ability to upkeep them, all these immigrants coming in, and also take care of its own citizens. So what kind of efforts would you like to see happen in Congress to help secure the border and also get rid of the hundreds of thousands of migrants who are already here?
I think we need to take immediate action. I just saw a video clip, I think it was last night, and it had a line that it looked to me like miles long. I don't know how long it was, but they're literally lined up at the border and being allowed in. And I don't understand this. I know the Texas governors tried to stop it, but these lines were apparently at the Arizona border. And of course, we have a liberal Democrat in charge in Arizona, and they're literally letting them line up, an invitation style to people to just line up and come in and break our laws. We're not talking about lawful and legal immigration. We're talking about violating American law, willfully and purposely endangering my children, your families, because they come directly into our community. I mean, they're literally there yesterday, and they're here today. That's what's happening. So the actions that have to be taken is immediate. I would hope that I believe Speaker Johnson has this in his sights. I would support his efforts. I would want to bring in not only make sure the funding is there for the Border Patrol, but bring in the agents and work with the colleagues. Obviously, as a junior congressman, I can't just subpoena people, but I would work with my colleagues to see if we can bring in the testimony, which I'm very familiar with. As a 20-year litigator, I know how to do testimony. Let's do the depositions. Let's make sure that we have the stories being told, and in doing so, I think the American public would be even more surprised than the Biden administration, and hopefully the Trump administration. At that point, a Republican administration will change the policies immediately, obviously. But we need to secure the border through direct and immediate action. Congress can do this tomorrow through a cutting off of certain funds that are being misused by the Biden administration, and try to force force Biden to obey federal law. I think it's moving in that direction quickly, and I think the fact that our Republican governor of Texas is taking direct action, we need to support that as a Congress. We need to make sure that he has the resources to finish that effort that he's doing, and of course, this is a complex issue, so it involves working with states. State actors have to be involved. Maryland is unfortunately opening up our taxpayer dollars. And so I think there needs to be an immediate cutting off of federal funds to states that are creating these sanctuary policies where $30,000 literally being handed out. I mean, this is just nonsense. $30,000 per family or per person actually being handed out, and then they're using our resources here, which is crowding our schools and harming our businesses. It's not creating any kind of economy that is worthwhile. It's causing people to flee. So I think we can take some good action that will cause our state actors to want to work with us.
So you would address sanctuary city as sort of one of your enforcement policies. Are there other ways in which we can strengthen enforcement for those people who've already come across the border? We can sort of address their cases.
Well, sure. I think we need to start requiring the laws to be enforced, and not allowing them, for instance, to allowing the Biden administration to let them in, first of all, and then release those who are arrested and tell them to come back in 6 months. That policy has to end. And I think that if states don't start prosecuting and deporting those who are violent criminals who are also in direct contravention to federal immigration law, who have violated their court orders, for instance, then we need to cut the funding to the state or the county that's doing that. We need to make sure we do that quickly, and I think Congress can have a very good role in making that happen.
So as technology progresses, so does the need for new potential oversight, new laws looking into it. One of the main things that people are looking into right now is what impact AI is going to have on jobs, on security, on so many other things. What, if any, laws do you foresee or would you like to see surrounding AI?
I think we need to protect our currency. Number one, we need to protect schools and our identity, our identity, and our and our children's identity. Second, and that would require federal policy that would prevent AI from being used in any context regarding currency, in any context regarding controls or rules for digital currency. There's a policy the IMF is trying to roll out from Rockville, Maryland, or from Silver Spring, Maryland. IMF headquarters and IMF policies are being rolled out right now to try to use central banking world digital rules that are similar to the CCP. So we've got, and they're going to use AI to then monitor people's transactions, is what they're proposing. It's on their website. I'm not making this up. It's IMF has a website on their policy. And if you look in their policy manual, they want to use AI to monitor yours and my banking transactions, and then use that to tie in a rulemaking system as to whether or not we're allowed to do that transaction or whether it violates the rules, whatever they may be. That's wrong. I think we can take immediate federal action to prevent that. That's a pretty unifying thing. Most even Democrats will be opposed to that. I've also fought AI use in 911 services as well as in voting and certain aspects regarding our voting systems. But for instance, there's a movement, and I fought this in both Maryland and Pennsylvania, but there's a movement to use our 911 centers to use AI calling, where you get you call 911 and you get a computer, you get a robot, and they handle your call because they're short on staff. That's got to end. We've got to make sure we have live people helping those who are in our most vulnerable situations. And then, generally speaking, in the Annapolis legislature, I killed a bill in my committee to allow for video monitoring and facial recognition input into a database for AI monitoring of students. Now, Maryland has an agency called the Longitudinal Agency, Maryland Longitudinal Data Center, agency where they track our students. And thankfully, because of some of the work that we did as Republicans in Annapolis to expose this, even the Democrats came forth with a protection of data for students. Now, the problem is it's not fully protected, and at any minute, our students can be tracked. I mean, there's already a movement on by international businesses to try to gain access to that data. And what would they use it for? Because they want to put it in databases, international databases that are AI-based and cloud-based, to then do many things like selling the data for money, all the way to government use for monitoring individuals, and that's just not appropriate at all. So I think federal action needs to be taken so that we ensure that privacy and practical protections are there in every aspect of wherever AI is being proposed. Now, there's some things that could be useful for AI. When you see the progress we've made with computing, there's certainly some roles for computing that can be beneficial for all, but we have to be very cautious and protective there.
So let me do a follow-up question. There's been a lot of discussion about TikTok and concern that the information, first of all, we don't know a lot about how the algorithms work within TikTok, but also the information is apparently shared with the Chinese government, with the communist government in China. Would you put restrictions on TikTok in the United States? How far would you go with that?
It is a concern. TikTok allegedly is, Chinese controlled, CCP controlled. I'm looking into it myself because of the amazing numbers of young people that are on TikTok, to the point where you can hardly communicate without it. I mean, it's shocking to me. I'm out on the campaign trail and I'm talking to people 35 and under, and everyone is on TikTok. Everyone that I've talked to, I haven't found a single person yet that is that age group. Oh, you're not. There you go, Jackie.
I do not have a TikTok.
Well, it's a big problem. I mean, it is a very powerful medium. It's apparently very interactive and useful. And one lady told me, in fact, I think she was. I'm trying to think of who she was now, but she's just a great conservative person. Might have been my hair cutter. I can't remember. But anyway, she told me that she does she does most of her pre-shopping on TikTok. I was like, what? I didn't even know you could do that. So it's very powerful. And yes, Mark, it's a concern that their CCP is tracking all this data. So again, I think it comes back to data control and who is actually owning these entities. And unfortunately, we haven't really gotten into the bottom of this. And a lot of people start smearing people like me as an anti-Chinese or conspiracy theory. And that's couldn't be farther from the truth. I had some of the highest numbers of Asian and Chinese supporters of any governor candidate in Maryland's history. And one of the things that they tell me over and over, most of whom are, the conservatives and the pro-freedom folks, most of whom escape China, is that you can't even jaywalk in China without getting fined. I mean, they monitor your every act over there, and then they tell you whether or not you're a bad person based upon some bureaucrat deciding that. So we've got to make sure that doesn't happen here. Unfortunately, TikTok is apparently internationally controlled that way. So, and by the way, this is bipartisan. As you might recall, I think it was Senator Cardin who shut down the CCP's data center at the University of Maryland. So we can work on this across the aisle, I think, to provide protections, making sure that the CCP is properly kept in check there, and that our data and our family's data is safe.
So as we come towards the end of the show, this is the part where we like to let people plug what they have coming up. Do you have a website for your campaign? Any upcoming events that you wanted to let us know about?
Thank you. Yes. Somebody else just popped up. I'm not on TikTok. Okay, well, good for you.
We're going to encourage people to not go on TikTok and watch Direct Line every Wednesday.
Right.
So, there you go. That's the remedy.
Much better.
And they can go to my website, coxforcongress.org. Please go to .org, coxforcongress.org, and you can click on the information there. You can support us. You can sign up to volunteer. This is the Movement 2.0. This is Dan Cox 2.0, and we're excited. I'm honored and privileged. I'm looking to work across all political spectrums, but particularly to help our party. And, somebody said, well, are you concerned about the fact that, so many are, some of, great Republicans are running in the race as well? And I'm like, absolutely not. I think it's fantastic. Why? Because first of all, the more the merrier. And secondly, it shows the momentum that was started in the last 2 cycles is strong. I mean, we've got like 5 or 6 candidates now. And why is that? Because there's momentum. So as the field narrows and as we move forward, I'm confident we'll be, God willing, we'll be the nominee. And I'm going to unite with all of those candidates who are, many of them, my friends. And we're going to ask for everybody to get on this train to win, because this is a winnable seat. It is our time. Republicans need it back. And our country, frankly, our country needs it. And we've got to win. So I'm dedicated to that, and I'm looking forward to it. So anybody can help us out, coxforcongress.org. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And a couple of plugs from our end. Coming up on December 10th, right, Dwight? The 10th?
Yep, December 10th, yes.
Yep, is our Toys for Tots Christmas and Hanukkah party.
Corrections, it's Katja's Toys for Tots.
Yes, in
Christmas.
honor of our lovely friend Katja Bullock, who passed away this past year. And this will probably be the last time we get to celebrate at her condo's penthouse. So come out, bring an unwrapped toy for Toys for Tots, and celebrate the holidays with us. And then I would be remiss in my duties as young Republican chairwoman if I didn't plug our Christmas gala on December 16th in Harford County. I saw a picture of the food we're having today, and it looks incredible. And there is no chicken on the menu. I am personally very excited about that. I've had enough chicken dinners this season. So come on out to that on December 16th in Harford County. But if that is not your speed, I know that the state party is also having their Christmas party on the 16th as well in Baltimore. So take a look at those great events. Mark, anything else?
And more important than that, you forgot the most important event of the season. It's the state party's fall convention this Friday and Saturday at the BWI West End. Come on down Friday night. We've got, and you can still buy tickets to the breakfast. Our breakfast speaker is Ken Cuccinelli, former Attorney General of the great state of Virginia. Come on down, support Ken. That's Saturday morning. You can still buy tickets for that. And Friday night, we've got a surprise speaker coming up too.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all for watching, and we'll be back next Wednesday.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, guys. God bless.